Hello, Dominic.
Hi, Bochi.
Hey, good to see you. Thanks for coming. So today, it's an exciting time for both of us, and I'm sure our viewers will also enjoy our conversation. So I really appreciate that you took out this time and then you're willing to talk to me. So thank you. And introduce about yourself a little bit.
Hi, my name is Domenic. I'm a student in Berlin. I study modern South Asian and Southeast Asian studies here. And my focus in my studies has been mostly on India and lately on Thailand and specifically on Northeast India. And that's also how Bochi and I met, because I was staying in Bangkok last year from January till May. And we met there.
When was the first time you met a person from Northeast India, or when was the first time you heard about Northeast India?
Both actually shortly after each other. So in my studies, I studied on South Asia mainly, but we didn't really hear anything about Northeast India, which in hindsight is a bit shameful, I guess, or it's a bit lacking out. So we mainly learned about North India, Mughals, colonialism, Britishers, etc., but not really about Northeast India. And the first time I actually learned a bit about Northeast India was when I got my visa to India, where it said that I was not allowed to go to restricted areas in India. And through searching, found out that parts of Northeast India used to be among these restricted areas, which I didn't know before. The first person was actually then my best Indian friend, who I, 2 days after moving to JNU in Delhi, met on the campus there.
I also know that you are writing a thesis related to Northeast Indian people. So can we talk a little bit about your thesis and please mention your thesis topic, and then why did you choose this topic?
Sure, yeah. The thesis that I'm currently writing, it's my master thesis. It's called The People That Make the Home. Northeast Indian translocal stories on home, belonging, and religious mobilities. Quote. And I got to that topic sometime, I think, during 2020 specifically, and a bit 2019, because I, during my studies, kind of learned that there are many similarities between Thailand and India, but also specifically between Northeast India and Thailand. And while I was staying in Thailand or in Bangkok last year, also learned that there's a growing Northeast Indian community of people from Northeast India. And then I found that very interesting to learn about how did they move there, why did they move there, how do they adjust to living there, what stories do they have to tell that kind of bring home and new home and Thailand together. And what can we kind of learn about through that, how people adjust to living in foreign or maybe also not so foreign places. One thing that also brought me to that idea is that in the past there used to be a couple of German-speaking or German ethnographers actually who moved to Northeast India, specifically to Nagaland, Manipur, and wrote ethnographies on them, which nowadays, some people kind of rediscover what Nagas in that case earlier were like, so to speak. But in the present and until now, these works kind of influence the way Northeast Indians in general and Naga specifically are treated. So often people have like these stereotypes of headhunters, naked, primitive people in mind. And that is a very sad after effect of these of their works, that people till now perceive people in a bad way. So I hope to contribute a more realistic and up-to-date work on how lives of Northeast Indians are shaped currently.
By the way, are you writing in English or in German?
Yeah, it's in English.
Okay.
The interviews I did were in English because that's unfortunately language that we have most in common. But I think it would be unfair to write in German and then not be able to share it with people whom I talk to. So it's in English.
So I'm definitely looking forward to read your thesis. So like as a Westerner and also as a research student, what is the biggest difference that you see between Northeast Indians and the mainline Indians?
One thing maybe, when I use this term of Northeast India, I guess many people have an image of what Northeast India is like in mind. It's become its own kind of category. But of course, people and communities in Northeast India are very different. So also these answers to questions would be different for each community living in Northeast India. But in general, if we talk about Northeast Indians, I guess one thing different is the different histories of integration into India. Also still ongoing kind of histories of becoming part of India. In the sense of that Northeast India used to be kind of described as a frontier, as something like not yet belonging to first British India and then also kind of first becoming part of India. Now it's kind of its own region, where people use this term to kind of insinuate that there's a lot of similarity, but it has a different history than mainland India, maybe. And something unfortunate and still sad is this experience of racism or discrimination that I think many people from Northeast India encounter in mainland India. There's also racism towards other communities in the South, for example. But Northeast Indians are kind of the ones who are disrobed maybe of their citizenship, so to speak. So people encounter them in mainland India and oftentimes do not recognize that they are also Indians. So people from Northeast India have to often prove in a way that they are Indians, or that they have the same right to citizenship as their fellow Indians in North and South India.
I'm happy that you point out that part, like the differences, like even though like myself, like I'm an Indian, right? But I even face the same, like what you mentioned about this racism and some other privilege and so on. Like for example, in 2008, I visited the Taj Mahal in Accra, and then at the gate, like they forced me to pay a foreigner fee. And I have to prove them like by showing my driving license, like Indian driving license, like, hey, I'm Indian and I'm trying to speak in Hindi. But then they will try to say, no, you are not from India. Give me more. So yes, it's a big issue. I think like the country, like we all the Indians should put an effort, especially in educating one another. And then also, of course, we need to talk more about this. So okay, so let's move on to the next question. According to your research, how do you find like we Northeast people adapt when we moved out of Northeast India to other mainline or main cities in India or outside India, like country like in Thailand or in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I think there are also very different means in how people adapt to living in different places. It also kind of comes down to, I think, which structures maybe exist already. So when people move from Northeast India to Delhi, to Bangalore, to Mumbai, there are some sort of structures already in place, right? Like maybe there's a cousin, an uncle, a grandfather, maybe even who has been living in the city. So there's some sort of infrastructure already. So if you move there, you can ask your cousin maybe to help you finding a house, or you can visit a local Naga restaurant or Manipuri restaurant already, because that is already in existence. And so people who move to these metropolitan Indian cities have some sort of support network maybe already. Then we have many associations like Naga Students Association, Manipuri Students Association, Tangka Students Associations, SMEs, etc., kind of institutions where people can turn to. So I guess there it's maybe initially easier to settle in. but also maybe sometimes difficult to get to know others again, because you're with many people from your own community, maybe even abroad, even in mainland India, so to speak. But I think even there, like one way of adapting to living in a different context for Northeast Indian is to rely on solidarity and like reciprocity. So by helping each other out in a different place. And with regards to Thailand or Southeast Asian countries also maybe, these kind of structures are maybe evolving. So the history of people moving to Thailand, for example, is not so long. It's just a couple of decades. So not too many people have been living here. And for example, there's not one place where many Northeast Indians live. In Delhi, maybe there are a couple of, or there's kind of a community of Northeast Indians living in Gurgaon, for example. But in Bangkok or in Thailand, they are spread over different parts of bigger cities or over different cities. So you can't just go to your neighbor who's a Northeast Indian and get help from them, but have to actively kind of build these networks first. But one way of adapting is still having these networks, building up these networks and helping each other. With regards to Thailand and Southeast Asia, an easier way maybe of adapting is that people say they blend in more. So if they go to mainland India, they stick out in a way. People perceive them as different. And in Thailand, they just kind of blend in. When Thai people talk to them, they might notice that they don't speak Thai like their mother tongue. So they ask, okay, where are you from? Really, you're from India? So there's some kind of distrust. But on the streets, they just blend in and are not questioned or even attacked, which also happens in mainland India sometimes. And I think something else that helps in adapting to life in Thailand is that it's perceived as a safe place, especially for women, but also for men from Northeast India, because there's less fear of being harassed, being assaulted, being mistreated in different ways. That does not exist in the similar way. Of course, there's also crime in big cities, of course, it just happens, but it's not directly targeted against Northeast Indians. It's what people told, of course. And then something which is similar for Northeast Indians, also from some mainland Indians who moved to Thailand, is that they perceive some similarities between Northeast India and Thailand. So, for example, the way food is sold on the markets, the kind of varieties of vegetables or of meats that they can buy in Thailand on just any market is very similar to home, many people said. So you don't have to go to specific Northeast Indian markets in Delhi or in Mumbai, but just go to any market. Maybe some things like pickled king chili or so you have to bring in from home. But in general, many things are just available, which helps in creating a feeling of living at home.
Wow, that's a very, very good observation. Like I agree to like everything that you said there. Like as you said, like when we go to in India, like I've already lived in Delhi. I've lived in Gurgaon that you mentioned. Also live in Bangalore and Dehradun. So those are major cities. And so when we go there, like what you said, I went there because my older brother was already there. And then we went to live along with my cousin and families. So, but like here, when I came to Thailand, I didn't know anyone except two. And those are like my friends from college, from seminary. And like adapting here for me was a lot easier. Like as you said, especially food, a very similar taste to Northeast Indian food, especially the Isan food. I also look like a little bit more like Thais, right? And so when I tell them like, hey, I'm from India, and like they will be shocked, but then they will be in the shock in the sense like they will be surprised, and they will be saying like, oh, really? tell me more, like in more an excitement tone, not like in India. You know, in India, they will try to take advantage thinking that I'm a foreigner. But here, they're like surprised and they want to know more. And I will tell them like, I'm from Northeast India, close to Myanmar, and then to Bhutan, and then also Bangladesh and close to China. And they'll be like surprised, like, wow. And so yeah, it's nice, really, really great observation from you.
Yeah, it's also in a way fascinating to learn about these similarities. Like on if we look at a map, Northeast India and Thailand are of course quite close to each other.
Right.
It's just Myanmar in between. But the way, at least my learning or my thoughts earlier were like there's South Asia, which is mainly India, and then there's Southeast Asia. So it's like two separate things.
Right.
That's how my thinking worked first. But over time, I was like, oh, okay, there's like many similarities because in the past people have moved between these places, and only recently we said this is one nation and this is the other nation, and one nation does not have something to do with the other. But in practice, the way people think and the way cultures work, like there are many more similarities. Yeah, and then one last thing that I find important to mention is that people from the Northeast Indian states always carry a sort of responsibility when they move elsewhere, and in this case, Thailand, because they, in a way, they are not just any individual. Of course, they're an individual, but they also represent the tribe maybe they belong to, or the ethnicity they belong to. So as someone from, let's say, Ao, so someone would represent Aos abroad, they would also represent their clan maybe, but specifically Ao and Nagas in general. And if people don't know something about Nagas, then they would just represent Northeast Indians. So in Thailand, for example, if someone leaves a bad impression, they might in general think bad about Northeast Indians. They might think bad about Nagas. So it's kind of puts a burden in a way on people, because they also have to see how they interact, what kind of impression they leave, because of course other people, other Nagas, other Northeast Indians, other Assamese would in a way be judged by how the other person does.
All right, so I'll ask another question, okay? So it's related to your research again. So what is your finding regarding why many Northeast Indian like leave their homeland? Why do they have to go out of Northeast India, and what was the reason?
Yeah, that's also many reasons, I think. Some people share the same reasons, some are kind of specific to, but one that is, I think, very common with people is the search for education, or so-called good education, which is slowly coming up more in Northeast India itself also. But in the past, or even still now, other colleges in schools, boarding schools, colleges, universities in like mainland India are considered in a way better, or their education more better for income later or for people's careers. So parents kind of look for ways to sending their children to these schools, or adults search for ways of getting enrollment in these schools. So that is very a common factor, I think. Some also move to Thailand for that, but most of whom I talked to first moved to mainland India and then later on to Thailand. Then there's this necessity of getting exposure, and so kind of to break out of Northeast India in a way by moving to mainland India and becoming exposed in bigger idea of India, so to speak. That's also not maybe specific to Northeast Indians. I guess also here in Germany, we would say we need to get some international exposure by maybe going to France or to Britain or so, and not only being in Germany. The idea of getting exposure is also something that I've heard often. Another one is to work for money, because people didn't find employment before their studies or after their studies in Northeast India. So they either moved to mainland India to work there or stayed in mainland India after their studies. Some also made very bad experiences in workplaces mainland India, which then drove them elsewhere out of the country. And another one that has to do with the history of Northeast India is ongoing conflicts in the region. Some of them are settled, some are still going on or glowing in the background. But these conflicts and wars also tore apart many communities or some neighborhoods, some existing systems of relations. So either I talked to themselves, or the parents felt it's not safe for their children to stay back, or they were also driven away as a family from the place where they lived before. So that also made them leave home village or hometown.
So true, like what you have mentioned. Like even for me, I think during my interview to you, I already mentioned I moved out from my village at a very young age, right? Like one of the reasons for education, like because there's I'm a village boy. I'm from the village, but I have to move away, go and live separately in the boarding school just for the sake of education, because there is no proper school in my village or just nearby to my village. I wish I have had that. And then as also like for my high school and for my graduation, there is no good school around where I'm from. So one of the things, and then of course many people also move around because of a job opportunity for working. Like we Northeast Indian, we also try to take care of our parents and of our siblings. Normally we are huge families, and then mostly our parents are farmers, so job opportunity is another factor that we have to move away. And also I think I need to add this: in the last 10 to 15 years, we notice people have started to travel a lot more, I think. And I see those two factors, like which with my observation. One is the rise of the internet, so you get to see more about the world, and so then you do research, right? And in that way, like we are getting to know more about other places, and the idea of traveling, and the idea of the possibility of getting out of Northeast India. And also secondly, this is my observations. I think flights, like the mode of transportations, like in the last 10 to 15 years, I think the rise and the booming of this airline industries have been also a huge factor.
And that also makes it much more feasible for many to move, because like earlier, if you moved to Delhi, you had to write a telegram, or write letters to stay in touch, or phone calls would be very expensive. It would take days. Imagine you would live in Trivandrum and would have to travel back to Aizawl or so. I don't know, that probably is even 4 or 5 days. So it would be very hard to keep in touch with your family. But nowadays these are quicker, and also more affordable.
Okay, so Domenic, thanks for talking to me. I should say in my time it's like this evening, and for you this afternoon.
True.
But do you have like any words of encouragement for the Northeast people, especially I would say young people?
I think a couple of ones. I think one is to definitely be to perceive yourself as someone with influence, or as a strong person. If you're living in mainland India, maybe you feel belittled, discriminated by the experiences you make. But I guess in many cases, it's very good to seek for help from friends, from within your community or from outside. And also to remember that you're quite large in numbers. 2012, I heard that was this exodus where 30,000 people from Northeast India moved out of Bangalore, and suddenly the city was in a kind of crisis, because many people who had been doing very valuable jobs were suddenly not there. So the city was kind of at a standstill. So you also have some power wherever you live. And another thing is to definitely rely on this solidarity that Northeast Indians so nicely show towards one another, also to people not from the Northeastern states, of course, but also to one another. And a last one, this is of course very easy to say from my perspective as someone who is not hurt by these things, but I think on many Northeast Indians who live in mainland India, there's a kind of pressure to integrate in the sense of landlords forbidding them to cook a kuni at home, for example, or not to meet with people from the different gender or so. So there's some pressure to integrate and to adapt to life in these bigger cities. But I think there should be some confidence to be different. After all, India is a very big country, so not everyone can be like the people who are living in these big cities. You're also an Indian citizen, so not every Indian citizen has to be the same way, but there are so many different ways people are in India, so that you can also be different while still being Indian, if you feel like that.
Okay, thank you very much for those kind words. I hope our listener will be motivated and will be encouraged with your words. And also, I think it's really nice to know like the opinions and the perspective of a Westerner, and also at the same time a student or a person like who is a researcher about our people. So that's so fascinating, you know. So by the way, I mean, before we just end, I would like to, can you just repeat the title of your thesis? And then is there any way like in the future you will convert your thesis into a book so that more people can read it?
Yeah, the title is, quote, "It's the people that make the home, Northeast Indian translocal stories on home, belonging, and momentous mobilities." That's the working title. Maybe it changes a bit, but that's the working title. It would be nice, of course, to have it in a way as a book. I don't know yet if that's possible. It's also, not finished, so and not graded, so I don't know if it will actually be a good thesis. But if it's possible, then I would, maybe there's a way of, it could be, for example, even if it's not a book, it could be converted maybe into a PDF, and I could give it to you. And so if someone is interested in reading it, you could maybe share it with them, the person who asked. Maybe that's a good way.
It would be nice. And by the way, when will your thesis be completed?
I hope end of September, beginning of October.
Oh, so that's like almost
soon-ish. Yeah, depending on how fast I write. There was a bit of like blockade, and words didn't flow as they should. But maybe that works better in the next weeks.
So anyway, once again, like all the best with your writing, like finishing up the writing. And I'm sure like you'll do a good job, I'm sure. But also thank you for like choosing the topic related to the Northeast Indian people. I think that's very nice of you.